And folks, welcome to another episode of Fowl Players Radio. This is Michael Spedden. Today we welcome David Libert, the author of Rock and Roll Warrior, My Misadventures with Alice Cooper, Prince, George Clinton, Living Colour, The Runaways, and more. Not only did David work in management with these acts and many others, he was also a songwriter and a performer as a member of the 1960s group The Happenings. This is a great book with a lot of great stories in it and some real nail biters. It was not an easy book to put down. I tell you, I was at the end of the book, I was hoping just to have more and more pages to read with these great stories. And I highly recommend this book. You'll feel like you were there, really. And David's book, this book can be found at www.rockandrollwarrior.com. The Fowl Players of Perryville are booking shows for 2022. We have some shows coming up on Maryland Party Boat and Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. For more information, please call 443-600-0446 or see www.fowlplayersofperryville.com. Subscribe to this podcast for free at www.fowlplayersradio.com or listen wherever you find podcasts online. No matter what platform you listen on, you can help us greatly by giving us a fair review and a 5-star rating. Also, be sure to visit our page on patreon.com, www.patreon.com/fowlplayersradio. We also have quite a few episodes now on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel, type in Fowl Players Radio, and you'll see the episodes that we have uploaded there. So please check it out. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy David Libert. And folks, welcome back to Fowl Players Radio. Michael Spedden here. And tonight we have author David Libert. David Libert, who was the author of this book, Rock and Roll Warrior, My Misadventures with Alice Cooper, Prince, George Clinton, Living Colour, The Runaways, and more. Welcome, David. I tell you, I've been fascinated with this book. It's an excellent, excellent read. Lots of great stories. And welcome to the show. Welcome to Fowl Players Radio.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that, and glad you enjoyed the book. It was an ordeal writing it, which is between that and managing George Clinton is probably why I don't have any hair today. But I appreciate I appreciate the good comments. Thank you.
I'll tell you, show business will do that to you because I can see I'm getting a little shiny myself here, so that'll do it to you. Definitely. Definitely. So, God, where to begin? In your younger years, you were talking about, having a love for music and singing. You had, earlier in your career, in the 60s, you had worked at the Brill Building. Now, the Brill Building was home to a lot of, I guess, song publishing companies. Is that the correct term?
A couple of things. Yes, home to a lot of publishing companies, production companies,
Sure,
small
right.
independent record labels. But it wasn't the Brill Building. There were several buildings that were like the Brill Building.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In an area on Broadway in Manhattan, and the area was called Tin Pan Alley.
Okay. Okay.
And I would hit the streets of Tin Pan Alley, one of which was the Brill Building. And if I walked into a building and if it was a publishing company, I told them I was a songwriter. If they were a production company, I was in a band. Record company was in a singing group. So that went on until I finally found someone who seemed to pique some interest in what I had to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, so you started, actually, writing songs professionally. And, in that time frame too, I think, you were, in the Happenings. So tell us a bit about those experiences. Especially the one thing I really wanted to ask about was I was, growing up and even today, huge Johnny Carson fan. And you had mentioned that you had been on Carson and Merv Griffin. Tell me a little bit about what being on those shows was like.
Yeah, we did all of those. Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, Johnny Carson. Those are really coveted spots because you knew that if you could get onto those shows, you could get the kind of exposure that would bring a lot of extra added sales to your records. It was, you know, in those days, there was no stereo TV. I'm not even sure at the beginning there was even stereo records. So if we had to do it live, if we had to do it live, we kind of held our breath because you never knew what it was going to sound like. I mean, the guy in the sound booth wasn't like a record engineer, you know.
Mhm.
He was just concerned about a little tiny little speaker that was, you know, part of the TV that people were listening to. So that was a little bit unnerving.
Mhm.
And so we learned to do, we finally said, look, this is the way we're going to do it. It's all going to be recorded except for our lead singer, Bobby Miranda. And, you know, so all you have to do is mix two things, Bobby and everything else.
Mhm.
So that made it sound a lot better. Were we nervous about it? It was just another gig, really, because we were just doing so many gigs at that time.
Mhm. Sure, sure. Now, you had mentioned in there that the Happenings went from being a vocal group into being a full band, and you had
Yeah.
started playing. You were playing keyboards and bass and everything with it. What was that transition like? I mean, did that take you all a lot of? I guess I'm sure you probably took a lot of time and rehearsal just to accomplish that.
Well, I had always been a musician. You know,
Sure,
I
right,
started
right.
taking piano lessons, but I was the only one in the band.
Hmm.
And, you know, we're talking 1966, 1967. And FM radio, which up until that time was basically, for most of us, just an unlistened to radio band frequency.
Hmm.
But it was all changing very quickly. One day, all of a sudden, there was, in New York, there was WNEW FM, and they were playing all this rock stuff, mostly stuff that top 40 wouldn't play, you know, album oriented rock,
Hmm.
you know, bands that were great but didn't have hit singles. And I realized the playing field was changing. All of a sudden, there was an outlet for you know, bands as opposed to singing groups, which we were, the Happenings were. Yeah, I was the only one that could play an instrument, and some guy, which was keyboards, some guy sold me an old Fender amp, little tiny Fender amp, and a bass, and a bass guitar, and I started playing around with it, and I realized, hell, I realized that I would never be able to play keyboards as well as would eventually be able to play the bass. I found my true instrument.
Hmm.
And Bobby Miranda, our lead singer, had been, for about a year or so, had been playing around with a guitar and was becoming really, really good at it. And then we added another guitar player. We brought one in, brought a drummer in, and voila, we were a self-contained unit at that point. And
Hmm.
it enabled us to, because, you know, other bands are writing their own songs, they're playing their own instruments. We were going to become obsolete. We simply needed to change to survive in that universe.
Hmm.
And so we did. Was it? Yeah, there were some growing pains involved, of course, but you know, a lot of rehearsal, a lot of work. We got it down. We
Hmm.
were pretty good. We could kick some ass.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I could just imagine too. I mean, I'm a bass player myself, and
Ah,
I'm a bass player, but I'm also kind of I do play guitar and harmonica. I can play guitar, harmonica, and sing at the same time. I cannot play bass and sing at the same time, let alone having the precision to do 4-part harmonies. So my hat's off to you, David. That's you know that's quite an accomplishment to you know, to be able to do that and everything, and to do it as well as you did. You know, I listened to, I did find some of your material online from those days, and it's quite good. I really enjoy listening to it. You know, that's definitely some good stuff. Um,
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you. I mean, our the thing that we did best was vocal harmonizing.
Hmm.
We did everything from, you know, like we had talked about before the show, your interest and my interest in barbershop quartets. And
Yep.
I love the High Lows, and the Four Freshmen, and the Four Seasons. And Was absolutely enamored with the Beach Boys. As a matter of fact, I think in my book, I said, when I was younger, I wanted to be in the music business, but I wasn't quite sure how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did daydream a lot. One of my dreams, that I continuously had was this fantasy was I got a call in the middle of the night from the Beach Boys organization. One of the Beach Boys just dropped dead. Would you be interested in joining the Beach Boys? Which is funny because when the happenings became, started to become successful, we actually did a run of dates with the Beach Boys, and I recounted this to Al Jardine, and he thought it was quite macabre.
Yeah, that is quite that. I agree with you. I agree with you on that. When it comes to so again, looking back on this thing here, I mean, I guess, if a stranger came up to you and said, so what exactly did you do in the music business? I guess your answer could just be yes. So, you moved, from being a performer, and you kind of got, I guess sort of behind the scenes on the managerial end, working with Alice Cooper. So tell our listeners a bit, I mean, and again, I don't want you to give the book away, during the, but, kind of tell us what the transition was like. How did you become, and come into your role with Alice Cooper?
Well, I left the happenings basically because I wanted to change. They didn't. They were playing colleges and nightclubs. Well, we were.
Mm-hmm. And
they felt that was the future. They could do that forever without hit records.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that, and I thought that was a losing proposition. I wanted to apply our harmony techniques, which we did almost better than anybody, and apply it to more contemporary musical structures. And we actually did. We recorded an album, a self-written, self-produced album called Peace of Mind, and it had some great stuff in it. And I wanted to put that all in the in our concert performances. They didn't want to do it. They thought that it wasn't a good idea. So we started to have creative differences. I didn't want to play colleges and nightclubs the rest of my life. I wanted to appeal to a more contemporary crowd, and they didn't. So I left. And over the next couple of years, I did a series of jobs. I was a booker for a club in Long Island and a few other jobs. I was Rare Earth's tour manager. That was a pretty cool job, actually. Mm-hmm. I like that. They were a great bunch of guys. They did a good show. And then one day, I got a call from Johnny Podell, my friend, and also the booking agent for Alice Cooper. The Alice Cooper band was looking for a tour manager. Would I be interested? And I went to visit Shep, and he hired me. And at first I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. I mean, I never seen anything. Our first gig was in Atlanta, and Shep said, just observe what's going on, David. You'll get the hang of it. There was no job manual, job description. I was pretty much on my own. And to me, it looked like 30 or so crazy looking people crawling over all of this gear and stuff like giant insects. And I said to myself, what the hell did I get myself into? I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. I left my nice cushy road manager job with Rare Earth for this. Was I nuts? But by the end of the week, I started to figure things out and get a handle on it. And I realized this was going to be a hell of a ride. And of course it was.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can just imagine, the shows back in those days. I mean, it was, this was a true theatrical performance, with the, I saw the pictures in there. I'd seen Alice Cooper. I mean, not in those days. I mean, I was probably about knee high to a grasshopper when, you had been working with them. But the Cyclops, the guillotines, the gallows, the giant tooth, all these other things. I mean, that he's a true showman. And I mean, doing all of those things, on stage night after night, all the equipment, everything that needed to be taken here and there. And you were a real innovator with, just running that business efficiently, getting things from point A to point B too. You mentioned that as well. I mean, there's a heck of a lot in there about, the concerts and the planes and the parties and everything, but you really did some innovative things, I think, when it came to, running the business end of it.
You know what I did? I hired a few friends of mine.
That's what I was getting at.
To be part of the crew, and these guys were electricians, they were contractors, they were into construction, real blue collar guys, but they were pretty smart, and I brought them in, and I remember, I enticed them to join by saying, you'll have the time of your life. It's just one big party. It's a little bit of work thrown in, but it's just, at the end of that first night, the guy that I had made head of the, stage manager says, Libert, can I swear?
Yes.
Libert, you motherfucker, you lied to me. You told me this was just one big party with a little work thrown in. It's 20 hours a day with, I'll stick it out. We're going to stick it out because we made a commitment, but you can forget about us ever being friends again. And he had a point. It was a lot of work. And in fact, a third of them had a ride in the trucks on a rotating basis, because they had to be there to supervise the unloading of the gear, and we were to put it on stage and all this. Well, let me tell you, by the end of the week, these guys that I hired, and they were pretty smart, trained the truck drivers to supervise the loading and unloading of the trucks that had to be there anyway. It wasn't, they could actually save time in the process. And also they, they decided how each and every piece of gear would be placed in the truck, what truck, in what, the orientation of it, the order in which it went into, all of that. And within a couple of weeks, they had shrunk the time a good 75%.
Yeah.
So now, it's still a pretty, arduous job, but at least it was a reasonable pursuit. And, instead of being there till 4 or 5 in the morning, they were back to the hotel by midnight or so and ready to party with everybody else. And oh yes, we're still friends to this day.
That's great. The old Fire Island crew, huh?
Right. I mean, Fire Island had a great effect on my life, because the first time I ever went out there, I guess in the first few minutes I was out there, I came to the conclusion, or I had this moment of clarity, I should say, that the most important thing in life is happiness. And for me, it was a no-brainer. The thing that was going to make me happy was a career in the music business. And that's why I pursued it, and quit my day job, and my Jewish mother, oh my God, you're gonna send me to my grave. I said, Ma, if it kills you, I'll give you the best goddamn funeral in Paterson, New Jersey. I said, listen, you lived your life, now I'm going to live mine. And, it all sort of evolved from there. So yeah, Fire Island had a big role in and most of those guys I met out there, the guys that I hired, they actually changed the whole personality of the Alice Cooper tour. They had this quick sarcastic wit. it was that, their pursuit of women and their penchant for having a good time and, knowing how to party.
Mm-hmm.
It influenced everybody on the road, including Alice and Shep. They all started to emulate these guys. That made it really a hell of a lot of fun, even more so than it was. So
Right.
that was great, having my friends and,
Right. Now, one of the reasons why how I ended up getting you to come on my show is through our mutual friend of ours, Mr. Bud Becker.
Bud Becker, yes.
Who you met through, I believe you met him through Alice Cooper or that tour. Is that correct?
I think I met him. Yeah, I met him through Dick Klotzman, who was the Baltimore promoter of all of Alice's shows. And that's how I met Bud. And Dick and I became friends, if you could call it that. We loved him. As a matter of fact, after one show, our next show was in Tampa, Florida 3 days later, and we decided to kidnap him and take him with us because we loved him so much. He was a real character. I mean, I remember one time we insisted that he pay us in cash. Maybe we needed the cash for one reason. So what did he do? He paid us in quarters, about 300 pounds in quarters. He thought that was very funny. And but he was a good sport. I mean, if he screwed something up, which was rare, but every once in a while he would, I would chastise him and just, call him every name in the book. And what was his response to that? It was, David, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to point out my shortcomings. I really appreciate it. We love the guy. So we took him down to Florida with us, and rather feeling like he was abducted against his will, he partied with us on our private plane all the way down to Tampa. It was great.
Right.
That's how I met Bud.
Yeah. And Bud had told me quite a bit. Actually, I had an episode with him. I'm sure you've probably heard Bud has been sharing his stories from his time in the music business as well. He had a series of CDs out that he released with his wife called, his Stories from the Road. And I've had him on for several episodes where he just talked about Sabbath, Alice Cooper, the Doors, all these things that he worked with, all these people that he worked with. And he told a pretty good story about, I guess it was Eva Marie Snake actually got Alice Cooper and the boys out of some trouble with the police. Because I would guess, in those days, you better have your P's and Q's together when you're performing in the Bible Belt, huh?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We had to be very careful when we were in that territory. That's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, you were saying like any hint of any kind of residue or smell of anything down there, they would be all over you.
Yeah, we had to be careful, of course. And but Alice, who didn't smoke pot himself,
right,
forbid any pot smoking on the plane. And his way of looking at it is the best way to deal with that, because he was afraid the authorities would come on the plane, they would smell it and everybody be in trouble. And he felt the best way to deal with that was to simply not do it on the plane. And, like I say, he didn't do it himself. So, we had to comply, of course, but, and so we didn't. But, there was plenty of flagrant drug use going around. If you could call flagrant drug use discreet, somehow or other we were able to do that. Right.
Now there was a story on there, and this would be sounded like something right out of a movie, involving your tour buses and having to kind of escape with your tour buses, or your tractor trailers from Brazil. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Brazil was a very interesting place. I mean, there's all kinds of stories in the book about Brazil, but I guess we were doing a show in Rio when this happened, and there was some guy was on the stage, and Hot Ralph, our stage manager, one of my Fire Island buddies, took it upon himself to grab the guy by the scruff of his pants and the back of his shirt and fling him as far as he could off the stage. And the other roadie sort of picked up on that cue and started throwing everybody else off the stage that was on there. And turned out that these guys were cops who felt they had the right to be on that stage. We had gone through something similar in Sao Paulo. There was 1 million people on stage before the show started. And we didn't, we had stage security, but it seemed like, metaphorically speaking, if somebody had a bigger, it's a military dictatorship. If somebody had a bigger badge than the guy that was supposed to be in charge of keeping people off the stage, you couldn't stop the guy from getting on. If they had a bigger badge, they were going to go on that stage, and nobody's going to. And in the Sao Paulo, it was actually one of our limo drivers who realized the chaos on the stage, and he got on the mic and said in Portuguese, "What's the matter with you people? The Alice Cooper band comes down here, and this is the kind of disrespect you. Now get the hell off the stage." And this guy, lowly limo driver that he was, got away with it because I guess he didn't have any badge at all. And they couldn't really take it out on him. They kind of had to get it off the stage, and they couldn't really, seek revenge on him because they would have to explain that to their higher ups. And they would also have to explain what they were doing on the stage in the first place. So the limo driver got away with it unscathed, and he was our hero that night. So in Rio, the same thing happened. But we didn't realize these people we started flinging them off the stage. And they were so humiliated that they commandeered the trucks after the show. They just, took possession of them. And I guess their deal was they knew we had other gigs to do in Brazil. They were going to hold them for ransom. And, it's a pretty crazy place. And that we would have to pay because we had to get our stuff back in order to. So Shep Gordon, Alice's personal manager, genius that he is, came up with this brilliant idea. He had a couple of guys hide in the arena or the venue until everybody left, and they locked the place up with the trucks inside. And the people that took possession of it, they went home too because the place was locked up. They figured they would deal with it in the morning. And at the right time, the two guys that were left there hotwired the two trucks and drove them smash through the gate and out into the night. And that was another thing. These cops couldn't really retaliate because it would become too public a thing, and they would have to explain what was going. So they had to let it go. We were starting to figure a few things out while we were in Brazil. Jeez. And I think the Alice Cooper entourage became simply more trouble than it was worth if you were going to fuck with us. So, they pretty much left us alone after that.
Wow. I mean, I could just imagine. I mean, you're stuck down there. You've got all these, and some of those people, I bet, if you didn't watch it, they could get pretty damn scary.
Yeah, you better believe it. Yeah.
I mean, there's probably all kinds of, bodies buried out in the Amazon rainforest, right. People that cross them. And now here you are, you got to get these tractor trailers out of there. You got to keep a tour going, and it's up to you. I mean, kudos for pulling that off. I mean, that's just something else right there. I mean, that was another reason why I just couldn't put this book down. I mean, it was just really, amazing. So, the tours that you did now, how many tours in total did you do with him?
Me personally, I did 4 years worth of tours. So that probably was, I did a Killer tour, a $1 Billion Babies tour, Schools Out tour, a Christmas tour, That's all stateside. And then there were 2 or 3 European tours, and then the Brazilian tour. So I did that for about 4 years. And I mean, it really took its toll. I had simply had enough after 4 years. I was just burned out and I wanted to leave.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine with, that you were saying that, the minute you opened your eyes in the morning, you were working until the minute you fell asleep at night. And that going on for years like that, those are probably 100-hour weeks easily,
Yeah. And it didn't just end there. When I was able to finally put my head down on the pillow, as I said in the book, everybody, I wanted full control over the touring situation. So everybody felt perfectly comfortable about calling me in the middle of the night about the most mundane of things. It was just, it was just, it took its toll on me. I felt at the end of each tour, there was a few more years taken from the end of my life.
Right.
It's a very intense, high speed, environment in which you're working, and you can only do that for so long. And besides that, I had learned so much from Shep and Alice's agent, Johnny Padell, the guy that got me the job in the first place. I felt I wanted to apply this knowledge to new endeavors, and I felt it was time to do that. I had to, if I was going to do it at all, I had to do it then. So I did.
Right. Now, from Alice Cooper, you went on to move on to some other acts. Another one of the acts was George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. And talk about another big stage show, one big stage show tour to another big stage show. And just over the top shows. Just amazing stuff going on. Tell us a little bit about maybe some of your favorite moments working with him.
Or most infamous moments working with.
That works too.
I love George. He was a unique character. He really was. And he, I was able to, when I stepped in, because of all my experience with Alice Cooper, which was a huge production, was able to streamline his production and turn it into somewhat of a well-oiled machine. And they just thought I was a genius. I wasn't. It was just it was their shit was just so chaotic, and Alice's was so finely tuned that whatever I did for George and company looked was a good thing. So because he had a staged spaceship that landed on stage, and he had a lot of props and stuff like that. So I made that all more manageable and easier to deal with, and so that was good. But yeah, George Clinton ruled by the sheer force of his will. He was quite an interesting guy, and the story was. In the beginning, George was in a band called The Parliaments, and they had a big hit, I Just Want to Testify. And then when it came time for them to receive their royalty payments, they didn't.
Right.
So from a little label, Rivalot Records, and a little label in Detroit. So he went to court, and the judge, who was really not well versed in what it meant to be exclusively signed to a recording contract, said to George, well, I see no reason, they own the name, The Parliaments. I see no reason why you can't sign with another label and use a different name. So that's what George did. He signed with Westbound Records, another label, Armin Baladian's label, with the stipulation in his agreement with Westbound Records that he had a right to be Parliament on another label, because in fact he was. So they signed that, that was the agreement with that stipulation. And then Rivalot Records went bankrupt. George went back to court and won back the rights to the name of the Parliaments.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Neil Bogart of Casablanca Records and said, if you want to sign the Parliaments, first of all, let's get rid of the Parliament instead of the Parliaments. Sounded a lot more, contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but Neil, our agreement with you is going to have a stipulation because I'm temporary.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but Neil, our agreement with you is going to have a stipulation because I'm Funkadelic. The band is Funkadelic on another label. So that stipulation was put into the Casablanca agreement. And then George said, whoops. Whoop, there we go.
There we are.
I could do an endless number of agreements with an endless number of labels as long as I use a different name and have that stipulation in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he did. So somehow or other, he single-handedly, and this is the only example in the music business that I'm aware of, single-handedly beat the exclusiveness of being on a record label. He could sign an endless number of contracts with an endless number of record companies as long as that stipulation was in the agreement. Now you think, what record company in their right mind would go along with that? Well, they all did because, by this time, Parliament and Funkadelic and, Brides of Funk, they were all doing really, really well. So if you wanted to have a funk mob artist on your label, you went along with that stipulation in your contract.
Right.
That's how he did it.
Wow.
And if that wasn't enough, he decided, you know what? I have all of these labels and all of the. So what George did as producer, he'd stand in the middle of the studio there and go, all right, drummer, go like this. Yeah, okay. And Bootsy, who played bass for him at the time. Yeah, and he gets it all going. All right. And guitar. He'd get it going, right? He would produce the track. And it wasn't until, he sort of had the basic track done that he would decide what band it was for.
Oh, right.
And then, and once he decided, he would still send the bill for that session to every single record company that had a funk mob artist on their label. So they all knew they were getting screwed, but they did it anyway because, they couldn't really prove it, until the product came out and they were making it, and then he made a deal. He did all of his stuff at United Sound Studios in Detroit. So he got he made the deal with the recording studio to send all those bills, and the complicit studio here, they got their share of the the ill-gotten funds. And George was fascinating to watch. He's such a street guy that he came up with that kind of stuff all the time.
He's a character. He's definitely a character. How about Prince? You would work with Prince as well.
Yes, I was managing Sheila E. for a while, and she was on the Purple Rain tour, and I like Prince. He was kind of tough. Alice Cooper ruled out of love. Prince ruled out of fear. Everybody loved Alice Cooper. They just loved the guy. Prince ruled out of fear, maybe because of his diminutive stature. I don't know. He was only 5'2", but he was a tough guy. He was tough on everybody. But for some reason, he was very nice to me. My feeling is that he was nice to me because he knew of my my history with George Clinton and Alice Cooper. I was somewhat older than most of the people in his inner circle, and so he was nice, and he adored George Clinton. He really idolized. He really looked up to George, so that gave me a special place in that whole Prince inner circle, I suppose.
Right. right. That some of the things that you tell me about these, so especially the perfectionists that so many of them were, and you use that word to describe quite a few of the acts that you worked with. They were always there was.
I like Prince. He was kind of tough. Alice Cooper ruled out of love.
Mm-hmm.
Prince ruled out of fear. Everybody loved Alice Cooper. They just loved the guy. Prince ruled out of fear, maybe because of his diminutive stature. I don't know. He was only 5'2", but he was a tough guy. He was tough on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, he was very nice to me. My feeling is that he was nice to me because he knew of my my history with George Clinton and Alice Cooper. I was somewhat older than most of the people in his inner circle, and so he was nice, and he adored George Clinton. He really idolized. He really looked up to George, so that gave me a special place in that whole Prince inner circle, I suppose.
Right. That some of the things that you tell me about these, so especially the perfectionists that so many of them were, and you use that word to describe quite a few of the acts that you worked with. They were always there was of course the partying and the good times and everything, but a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Interesting. You had mentioned too, working with the Runaways, very young Joan Jett and Lita Ford and others,
right?
And what was that experience like for you? I think it was in Japan. You just worked with them in Japan quite a bit.
Well, I booked them in Japan. I didn't go with them on that trip.
Right.
But that was an adventure in itself, and when I get done telling you about this, I'll tell you something about Cherie Currie. Kim Fowley, their notorious manager, wanted them booked in Japan. Mm-hmm. So I did. And then the night before they were leaving for Japan, I get a call from Udo, Mr. Udo, the big promoter in Japan, who in fact is still the big promoter in Japan. And in his best broken English, he said to me, "Oh, Mr. David, this is very important." "What's that, Mr. Udo?" "Very important in Japan, Mr. David. Girls on stage, wild, yes. Girls off stage, wild, no. Very important in Japan." And I said, "Okay, I will make sure that the girls get the message in very clear and certain terms." So thank you, Mr. David. Well, obviously it fell on deaf ears because they left a trail of wrecked hotel rooms, unpaid bills, and sexually abused young Japanese boys and girls. It was unbelievable. So, but I like the Runaways. They were an exciting band. They were fun to watch, and I'll tell you, you'll be the first to know. I mean, it's just in the talking stages, but their lead singer, Cherie Currie, we've actually remained friends, and she wrote a book too called Neon Angel, a bestseller, and they turned it into a movie called The Runaways.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We're kicking around the idea of doing a college lecture tour together.
Hey,
where she would, she would talk about her exploits. I would talk about mine. We would go back and forth with some banter. We're a lot different in ways. In my mind, she's politically a right-wing wacko, and in her mind, I'm one of this liberal, communist, socialist, East Coast Jew. So you can imagine all of that going, but we're friends. So you can imagine all that going back and forth. And so we're playing with that idea of maybe playing 20 or so colleges that have music departments, like Berklee School of Music in Boston, and have communications departments where they have journalism, and so let's see if we can get the school engaged in the process of it. So that may happen. I mean, I don't know yet, but I think that would be a lot of fun for me and Cherie, and I think it would be very entertaining for any school that decided to book us. What do you think?
Well, let me tell you something. I mean, the reason why I do this show is exactly that, because I'll just give you a little bit of history here without, going on about it. But, the reason I started this show was because in this area that I live in, I'm in the Maryland, the Mid-Atlantic, I've performed, Baltimore, DC, New York, musician for many years. I'm an actor now. There are so many great performers just in this region alone, some of the bands you may not have heard of outside of, this, 5 or 6 state area, but around here, they were like the Rolling Stones. Like one of the bands, like I have their shirt on right now, DC Star, did some touring and things like that, but they were kind of focused here. A lot of great history, a lot of great stories, and these stories need to be told. These stories need to be told. And I'd mentioned to you too, some of the other guests I had, Bud Becker, another friend of ours, I think that we have in common, David Snowden, who had worked with Alice Cooper and Joan Jett and a number of other people. I've had him as a guest, and there is a wonderful history, stories that need to be passed on or else they're going to die. And I think with your story, and I haven't heard all of hers, but I tell you what, I encourage you to get out there and do this.
Hers are a little bit more lascivious than mine were, I'll tell you that.
Yep. Please, by all means. I mean, I really think that you would be doing everybody a great service. And I really think that if there is any chance, if you had a really good lecture one night between the two of you, I mean, I would record them. I would archive them somehow,
Yeah.
I would archive them because, again, these are the stories from the people that lived it. Not just, I knew some guy who did this. No, I was there when this happened. That's you. And I really think that you should do this, and I really think that this book, and the thing is too, I think younger bands need to know what it was like back in those days too. Younger bands, people that are playing nowadays need to know what the old days were like.
Well, that, the old days was really the golden age of rock and roll, the early 70s. And, that was, that's the period that when we think of rock and roll, certainly old guys like us,
right?
That's what we think of.
Yeah, my prime years of playing was between 87 and 94, and I still do play, but again, I'm more of an actor now. I'm more involved in that stuff, and it was a magical time. It was the tail end of what you were talking about. We went out in those days. There was no internet, so to get people to our shows, we went out to the clubs and handed out flyers and shook hands and bought beers and gave out tapes. And that was a part of the experience. When we went on the road, we slept in the U-Haul, when we would go from Baltimore to New York, or, we wouldn't sleep over in DC, but, we would be driving down there in a sweaty van to go play and, not making that money, making enough to get by and pay gas and tolls for the way home. But I tell you what, I wouldn't have had that any other way. Because it was just a magical time to be out there, and in the region that I was in, the Baltimore, DC area, it was a big deal when one of us got to play in New York. It was a big deal when one of us went to CBGB's and, or any club up there, and whenever there was an opportunity for that to happen, the gig that they had down here before they did that, it was like a bon voyage party. And a lot of times there were car caravans going up there to go up and support each other. And you just don't have that nowadays. I started playing again in 2005, and I went out to a club to give out flyers. Everybody looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, what's this? It's a flyer. Hey, why don't you come see us? I don't know. Then half of them ended up on the floor. And I was like, all right, well, I felt like Rip Van Winkle going to sleep and waking up in a completely different world.
Right. Yeah,
and you could probably,
it was a
yeah,
different era, sure.
yeah, and you could probably list, so many other differences. I'm 6'6". You could probably make a list taller than me of all the other differences that you've witnessed over the years in this, I bet.
Yeah, it's a different era. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty much semi-retired now.
Mm-hmm.
The book, of course, was a almost was a huge undertaking. I never
Mm-hmm.
realized it
Right, right.
when I wrote it, but in the end, it was almost overwhelming. It's a different universe today. It's
Mm-hmm.
certainly with the advent of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Kids don't buy CDs anymore. Listen, for $10 a month, you could subscribe to Apple Music, or
Mm-hmm.
$10 a month, you could subscribe to Amazon Music. And by simply asking Alexa or Siri, you can listen to virtually anything that was ever recorded in life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you have to. Yeah, why would they? Buy a CD when you can do that?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, to us, it was a different era. We were almost identified as to who we were by our album collection, the bands that we,
Mm-hmm.
that we collected, and the music we listened to. It's sort of what's the word I'm looking? It's sort of identified
Mm-hmm.
who we were, even. That's not the case today. Kids don't buy records; they just subscribe and listen to it. I can't blame them,
Mm-hmm.
because, like I say, it opens up a whole new universe. They can listen to anything, merely by asking for it. But yeah, it's different. It's a whole different thing. And the business itself is, there was no Spotify, Pandora, and that's what kids listen to.
Right,
There was
right.
somebody that wanted me to be their manager, and in the process, she said to me, David, I want you to go to Spotify and listen to the top 20 and tell me what you think. And she said, get back to me when you do it. And so I listened, and I got back to her, and she said, did you hear a single guitar or a real drum in any of those 20 songs? And the answer was no. That's not to say that the music isn't, is good.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can argue back and forth about
Oh
that.
yeah, sure, right. Yeah.
But that was true. I mean, even the way music is made, it's completely different today. It's just a different
Mm-hmm.
universe indeed.
Another thing that I've noticed too, and this is just my feeling, is that when you bought an album, you bought an experience. I remember when I was a teenager and I had, down in the basement of my parents' house, I had my stereo down there, and I would get the record home. I'd open up the album, I'd put it on, I'd have my headphones on, I'd sit down in my beanbag chair, and I would open up the album. And as I'm listening to it, I'm reading the inside, it would fold open sometimes, and you would read the liner notes, and you would read
Sure.
the credits and the lyrics and everything. And you just don't get that now. I mean,
No.
the artwork, the album cover. I mean, I guess you do get cover art, but you don't get all the things.
No, you don't.
And part of the experience too, I think. You agree?
Absolutely. Now if you want to find out anything, you got to go to Wikipedia. See what
that can be scary.
Yeah, it is a different. Well, that's one of the things. Being at that Alice Cooper show last night, it brought back a lot of memories and a lot of good feelings. And of course, it was great seeing everybody, and the show was great. I mean, Alice has it down to a fine science at this point. It was terrific. Yeah, it's a different era. It makes me wonder, where it all is going to go. You never know. But yeah, it was a lot of fun last night because of that. It brought back a lot of old memories and things of that nature.
Yeah, I remember, and you were also talking in the book, kind of more recently, and I mean, I guess you've been friends with these guys for years, Flo and Eddie. from the Turtles.
Yep.
I guess they were known by their regular names, the Turtles, and they left and kind of adopted that. But Howard Kalin and Mark Volman, and they helped you get some royalties that were owed to you. And they've been friends for a long time, because I saw pictures of you and them on the plane with Alice Cooper in the early 70s as well.
Yeah.
I've always liked those guys, but I've never had an opportunity. I think I've heard a couple of interviews with Howard. What are those guys like? Are they good guys? They seem like they're good guys,
The best. Listen, they were the opening act for Alice Cooper
Mm-hmm.
for several of those tours. They were Alice's favorite act. He loved having them around. They were, and they were, they were fun-loving. They were warm-hearted. They were really good guys. And actually, as tour manager, they made my life as tour manager a little bit easier, because it wasn't totally incumbent upon me to keep everybody amused. Now I have professional comedic backup, and they were terrific. And because they did make life a lot easier for me, I saw to it that they were were given every amenity that a big first-class rock and roll tour could provide. I made sure they were well taken care of. I'm not sure whether it was because of that, but 40 years later, these two guys, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, decided to sue SiriusXM and Pandora for playing their music without paying them artist royalties. There was a federal law at that time that said anything recorded prior to 1972, you were not obligated to pay artist royalties. Publishing and writing, yes, but so they sued. They sued SiriusXM for $100 million, Pandora for $25 million, and in the end, it became a class action suit, in which I joined as one of the happenings. And in the end, SiriusXM settled for $210 million, Pandora for $90 million. And it ended up, waiting for my check. My check comes, and there's none of that 300 million in there. So I start to do a little investigating, and I realized that the Warner's, the people who owned the Happening Smashers at that time, and didn't do their due diligence, and they allowed these other obscure companies actually to claim ownership of the Happenings masters. So it took a couple of years to sort it out, but I did get it sorted out, and now I did get part of that 300 million on behalf of the rest of the Happenings, and we enjoy getting more record royalties today than we ever did 50 years after the Happenings had hit. So that was a happy ending.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin. We appreciate it.
I really think that's a good thing, because I had a couple of recordings years ago that I put out there, Amazon and Apple, and and they're like, okay, you can do, people can buy the CD, and I'm like, okay, sure. So we'll send them a CD. They let me know where to send it, fine. And then you get these things for plays and streams and things like that. So I get this huge envelopes coming to the house, page after page after page after page. I guess each stream was like, what, 1/100th of a cent. And it's like, page after page after page. Here's 95 cents. Okay, there you go. I'm like, well, wait a minute now. I took the stuff off. I was like, forget it. I may as well just not have it out there than
Well, let me tell
not
you,
get anything for it.
Let me tell you, because of the influence of those lawsuits by Howard and Mark, Congress passed the Music Modernization Act, which is going to kick in about 2 years.
Okay.
And everybody's going to get paid a fair amount on that streaming. Everybody, SiriusXM, Pandora, they're all making money. We're going to get our fair share as well.
Good. Good. And that's the way it should be. That's really the way it should be, you know.
Of course.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So let me ask you this at this point. I mean, you've done so much. I mean, this book was just amazing. You know, all these stories. I'm sure there's probably quite a few you may have left out for whatever reason, but
yeah, I did for whatever reason.
Would you say that there's anything left on, you know, on the proverbial bucket list for you? Or what do you think?
No.
Listen,
I moved to the desert, out here in the desert from LA about 7 years ago. I'm enjoying a life of leisure, you know, which gave me the opportunity to do that book, actually. So, you know, that was a good thing. I've basically become an animal rights activist. I have 3 rescue dogs. I had to close the door so they didn't come barging in here in the middle of all this. I'm with my girl. I mean, I'm blessed. How many 79-year-old old bald guys would have a beautiful girlfriend, enjoying life, and, you know, being comfortable enough to enjoy it. So yeah, listen, I get inundated with calls from people who want me to produce them or manage them. You know what? Unless it sounds incredibly enticing or sounds like it might be fun, maybe make a little money, I turn virtually everything down. I mean, I like the way my life is now. So this is probably it. I mean, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. Amen to that. That's great. That's really great to hear, you know. And I did want to ask you, if I can, just a little bit about, you know, your dogs, because my wife and I also have rescues. We have a one dog that we have is a white German Shepherd. Her name is Shiloh, and I think she's probably about 7 years old. We got her from a friend who unfortunately had to move and couldn't take her, and he comes and sees her and stuff, you know, when he's around. And you know, we have her, and we have a Chihuahua Rat Terrier mix who was rescued from Puerto Rico. There's a beach in Puerto Rico, unfortunately, where people discard unwanted dogs. And a bunch of people went down and rounded up a bunch of the dogs and brought them up to a shelter. And my wife had a job training dogs at PetSmart. And a bunch of people from the shelter came in with the dogs, and they had Barney, who is his name.
I have a dog named Barney.
Yeah. They had him dressed up in a little pirate suit for Halloween, and my wife fell in love with him. And then a couple of weeks later, we went out and got him. And he's wonderful. He's wonderful. And, you know, it's a real shame that these things happen to these dogs, you know, all these unfortunate things. But it is a good thing that there are people out there that are you know, willing to adopt these dogs and give an older dog another chance. And I think a lot of these shelters are getting away from being euthanizing shelters, I guess, unless it's absolutely necessary, you know. They're not just doing it because the dog's been here X amount of months. They're doing it because there may be a health issue or something. But you know, but I think, and as you had mentioned in your book, social media has just blown that up. You know, social media has just made this such a popular thing.
Yeah, you know, say what you will about Facebook, Instagram, and their ilk. The upside of it is it's made so many people so aware of the plight of abandoned, sheltered, abused dogs that the euthanasia rate has diminished profoundly, you know. And a lot of shelters have changed their policies to more humane type of policies, and those shelters that don't are subject to a lot of pressure from you know, animal rights activists and you know, even the legal organizations that's, you know, that go after them. And so yeah, it's made a huge difference. And every day more and more shelters are adhering to a more policy, a caring policy for the animals in their, in their care. So yeah, it has worked out, and it's getting better all the time. Hey,
Yeah.
there are countries that have no kill policies, and
Mhm.
the truth is, there's more people that want dogs than there are dogs that are available in shelters. So it should all work out.
Mhm.
Hopefully one day it will.
Right. Yeah, that's really a nice thing, with how that has really changed, and a lot of positive changes come that way. And
Yeah.
and the thing is too, it seems like one thing, we could talk about different political points of view and things like that. There's in a lot of ways our country's in pretty bad shape with a lot of the divisiveness, but I think a lot of people agree on loving dogs.
Cherie Curry loves her dog.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, love dogs. And that's one thing that we all have in common. And I just wish that we could kind of learn to remember what we all have in common going forward and kind of repair things. And again, I won't get on a soapbox or anything like that, but I think the one thing that you see a lot of people do agree on is their love for dog and other animals too, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure having you on. I mean, again, I just absolutely love this book,
Thank
and
you
Roll
so
Warrior.
much, Mike. That's really great to hear.
Rock and Roll Warrior. Here it is. You can kind of the way my Zoom is set up here, the cover's kind of going in and out, but we will have in the show notes and everything.
And I'll send you
some
placards where that you can show up, and as to where the book can be obtained and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And you want to plug your website for the book while we're wrapping up?
Well, you can go to rockandrollwarrior.com, and you can get an autographed copy. The book isn't actually going to be out for a couple more months. What we've been doing for a limited time is to offer anybody that buys the book prior to the official release date an autographed copy. So if you buy a book now, you'll end up getting a book autographed by me, and that's going to go on for just a little while longer for this, these limited edition books, and the response has been overwhelming. I mean, I can hardly believe it myself. Everybody wants a copy of Rock and Roll Warrior. So if you want your copy, go to rockandrollwarrior.com and order your copy now.
Well, folks, you heard it straight from the author's mouth. David Libert, Rock and Roll Warrior, My Misadventures with Alice Cooper, Prince, George Clinton, Living Color, The Runaways, and more. It's been a pleasure having you. And thanks again to Bud Becker for introducing us. I really appreciate that. Yep. As a matter of fact, Bud is going to be next week. So he's coming back again, I think probably for the 5th time. And we're going to talk about his years or his time working with Rod Stewart, amongst other people. So, so he's always a great episode. He's just full of information. So, and I just love listening to it. Again, more stories that need to be preserved and told. So, David, thank you all. And thank you all for listening, folks. David Libert.
Thank you, Mike.
Fowl Players Radio.
Thanks a lot.